Hello, welcome back to Emerge, the health podcast for busy, high-performing women. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Swenson Ridley. I'm really excited for today's conversation because this is going to be different from any conversation we've had on the show to date. I am joined by Estelle Giraud, who is a PhD scientist in population genetics, turned commercial operator and leader in biotech and frontier medicine at Illumina, and now a turned founder. She's also a mother and a woman founder. She has had to navigate the change and challenges that come with this journey, and she's deeply excited and scared by the rise of big data in healthcare and wellness, and passionate about creating a better healthcare system from the ground up, especially for individuals. So Estelle, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. You're not taking on a small challenge by any means. So I would really love to know, like, how did you get here? I know you've got kind of layers to your story, but how did we end up here?
So where to jump in? No, I feel like, my entire personal professional background has really been at these intersections and shifts. So like starting out in academia and then moving to commercial and then starting this journey of becoming a founder and everything that goes alongside that, and in parallel to all of that, having my personal journey through my own health and kind of managing my health, managing it across countries, and then my journey into motherhood, and it all kind of coalesces in this situation of I can't imagine doing anything else with my life right now, and the purpose and the insights that I feel like I have to bring to the table. And so you've covered kind of at a high level that journey and that trajectory, but leaving Illumina, and the company that I worked with for 8 years, I loved my role at Illumina. I loved my team. I loved the work that we were doing. It's an incredibly mission-driven company, and their mission was around how do we unlock and like really improve human health by unlocking this power of genetics. And genetics, for those that are not familiar with this, is becoming mainstream. Like the technology advances that we have in this space are really kind of sparking this entire new way of doing medicine. And how do we think about doing really predictive medicine? And so I saw that coming, and I got to work at the front line of that industry and loved it. And it was the hardest decision that I've had to make professionally to leave that. But I saw again and again and again, these just like problems that we have in healthcare in this space at the infrastructure layer of healthcare, and no one was addressing it. And I also really deeply care about privacy, like you touched on that as well. But I want to create a future world where we do have a socially just healthcare system, and people's health data is respected and is used for good, but we're able to do that in an equitable way for everyone. And people weren't, there is such a risk that doesn't happen. And I feel like we're at this tipping point in the industry and in society right now where that needs to happen. And so it became this just burning urge for, a couple of years that I couldn't stop thinking about this before I eventually left Illumina. And then in parallel, and we can talk a little bit about like what Trellis Health does, but my journey into motherhood at the same time and in parallel deeply impacted the way that I think about our go-to-market strategy and the products that we build.
Yeah, so let's touch on both, because I know your company, Trellis Health. So kind of just give me a picture of what it does. And I know right now it's focused more on like pregnancy and pre and postnatal care, which is a huge need. I didn't share my previous hat before I got into doing what I do now. I was a pediatric and perinatal chiropractor. So
oh wow,
I actually have some significant background in that too. So we can have that conversation. But kind of give us an overview of like what is the purpose of Trellis Health, and what are you trying to achieve in the world, like, with that? That's a big question.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's also good. So, our mission is to create this single source of truth for all of your health data. So we all experience this today, especially in the US. You have multiple logins, multiple different MyChart accounts. If you've moved around, your health information is kind of spread all over the place, and you don't get a lot of value out of having that all in one place. And even just with COVID, where are all your vaccine records? Whereas for your family or for yourself, like, it's very difficult for you as a consumer to access this information easily and all in one place. So primarily, and then genetics, wearables, like all of this new health information that currently also lives all over the place. So we are pulling all of that all together in one safe place for consumers to kind of have that organized for them in a really kind of clean and simple way. We take it one step further, and that is, having it all together in one place is great, but you really want to be able to derive value from that and really kind of make your life easier. And so it's definitely relevant if you're sick, but it's also, how do we just improve the experience and the care journey for people as they just go through their lives? And this goes back to, my own pregnancy journey. I was, I had a reasonably uneventful pregnancy, but I did suffer from prenatal hypertension, and I had postpartum preeclampsia, and I'm also an IVF mother and had a multi-year journey through IVF into pregnancy. And the level of responsibility that women take for their own health through that journey is just mind-blowing. I had a corporate job at the time, and it is just so much self-education. My care team was great, but just filling in those gaps, that kind of logistical management, and that carries on for women post pregnancy. Once you've done that, you kind of take on this role of chief medical officer for the family. So you're taking on the kind of caretaker logistical management of your whole family. And so our idea is, or our insight really is, how do we take health information, put it in easily in the hands of a woman at that point in her life, and help streamline that journey. So we call it a digital concierge. It really helps to manage that like day-to-day mental load and help her approach those appointments with more confidence and agency and kind of have ownership over that health journey. But then ultimately we want to transition that into enabling families and women wherever they are in their health journey to be able to easily manage their health. That's not just pregnancy. We're starting out with pregnancy and the tools that we're developing around this like digital concierge for pregnancy. But that transitions well past that pregnancy event.
Yeah. Well, diving into this, so I haven't heard of anyone else doing what you're doing, so it's really awesome that you're doing that. And there's, such a need for, I like the word you use, with ownership in our healthcare, because we've developed this attitude in the Western world of like, doctors are omnipotent beings and they have all the data and they have all the answers, and we really kind of know nothing, and usually you forget 3/4 of whatever they tell you when you're in there, if they even tell you anything. So it's really great to just see you bringing that. So I think a lot of us don't realize that it's our data, it's our information, and we should be able to access it easily and simply, and do that. And I know as a practitioner, like the thing that I hated the most, still, I mean, I still take soap notes, but like charting is one of the most frustrating parts of my job. And there's a lot of doctors who honestly don't do a good job. And so having access to that and being able to say like, hey, that's not actually what I said, like making sure our information is actually correct is something that we should have the right to, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's been some legislative change. Like the patient, there's so many problems in healthcare and they're like layered problems, but at its core, I think a lot of the issues that we struggle with is this sense of ownership. Like there's so many players involved, and if people are not feeling like a passenger in their health, and they're just being kind of told what to do from the doctor, and it's kind of overwhelming, and they don't have the tools and they don't have the visibility into, you know, their own health, they're less likely to make decisions to protect and nurture and, you know, have better health, because you don't feel like it's yours, and there's not that level of visibility. Whereas I think a lot can be gained by really kind of inviting patients and individuals into that care journey, and at the same time, from, like you say, from a practitioner standpoint, you know, there is so much that we can do in terms of digital tools now to make their jobs easier, and so that they're not charting and they can spend more time like face to face actually looking at a patient and, you know, operating within their license, you know, what they're trained to do, and not, you know, filling in screen after screen after screen in an EMR system that's not, you know, not designed in the right way for our system to really flourish. And this is a huge problem, right? This goes beyond trellis health and what we're building. Yes. We're not. Right? Yeah.
And but I think it's important to bring up too, because, and I haven't talked so much on the show about like all the things that are wrong with healthcare. Everyone knows this, right? Like we all, every woman I talk to is frustrated, and, you know, doctors don't listen to me, and no one hears me, no one understands me, or, you know, it's like they're just being told what to do, or told they're fine when they really don't feel that way. And, you know, we're alluding to a bigger part of the problem, which is just how the system's designed. I mean, you know, when I was a chiropractor, it's like time is money. If you spent more than 7 minutes with a patient, you're losing money. And there's not time for being able to be fully present and do all the things you're supposed to do, and like, you know, fill out 3,000 pages of paperwork on, you know, every 12 visits or whatever. It's just, there's so many things that are wrong. But I love that you're just bringing awareness to.
We have a young gentleman
we have an interruption going on.
Part of the 9-year-old
is well. trying to come in. But, you know, just bringing awareness to our own health. And then specifically, I wanted to dive into the pre and postnatal period, because that is an area where our, it's like you're pregnant and then it's like, bye, you know, we see you in 6 weeks and then we drop you. So I'm curious how you guys are, you know, how Trellis's health is coming into that conversation, because no matter what age you are, whether you're a grandma or, you know, currently in the age of having kids, it's a big problem. And, you know, with mental health, with follow-up, like postpartum lasts 7 years, and there's
at least,
you know, I mean, we get care for 6 weeks of that.
right. And the impact to your body as well, it's like it doesn't go back necessarily to exactly what it was before. So and we did extensive user interviews, and heard this again and again and again from women, is you get so much focus during that pregnancy period, and then suddenly, like, you have this birth event, and, you know, maybe that's a natural birth, maybe that's a C-section, maybe that's like, there's so much that can happen at that time point. And then you get kind of like, okay, check out, you know, after an overnight in the hospital, and we'll see you in 6 weeks. And it's like, what happened?
You have, you know, you go from weekly visits to like, oh, you're fine, you know, go figure out how to keep another human alive. Good luck.
No, and I think women, like, this is one of the biggest, it's an opportunity, it's a gap. It's just, we have so much work to do in women's health, and I'm really encouraged to see companies being founded by women to address some of these care needs that women face that have been overlooked for such a long time. And so there are a lot of new kind of digital health companies and women focused communities and platforms to really support this. But I think there's also like a lot of work that has to be done on the entrepreneurial front to recognize that this is a problem. This is not a niche market, right? Like this affects nearly every woman. It's not a small market. It's not a small problem. Like we need solutions, and women are starting to kind of demand these solutions. And so I'm really encouraged to see that this is growing, but there's still a huge amount of work to be done. 2% of venture capital money goes to women founders, and like only a fraction of those are addressing these kinds of problems, and they're enormous. So, that overlooked opportunity is like our opportunity as female founders wanting to address these needs.
So I'm about to go on a soapbox because you just you just pushed my little button here. Which the thing that and I've shared this on the podcast before. There's lots of different ways that we can fulfill like what really drives us and what we're really passionate about. And so my thing is women being fully self-expressed in their lives, because I find far too many of us are we've been taught to not share our voice, to not speak our truth, to not stand up for ourselves. And this is what you're doing. And this stays in context of taking ownership of our health, which is huge, especially because healthcare has always been male dominated. It's one of those male dominated fields. The tech world has been a male dominated field in all of this. So first,
I'm unapologetic about the insight that I bring to this space. Like we need other voices in this space, and we need women building these tools for women with that insight. So I mean,
no one understands us as well as we understand ourselves, right? Like
no. And women have been excluded from medicine, like actively excluded for almost 30 years. Women of childbearing age were not allowed to take part in clinical trials, right? So like from the early 70s until the 90s, we could not, like women were not actively enrolled in clinical trials. And so that means that a lot of the diagnosis criteria, the drugs that have been developed, the ways that we present with diseases, I mean, heart disease is a really good example of this. Like it affects more women than men, and yet women present differently with different symptoms. And so it takes that many more years for a woman to be diagnosed and treated properly for these diseases. And that's crazy. Like how does that even happen? We need to change that.
Yeah, and I'm sure we could dive into a whole bunch of stuff around genetics with that too. But you bring up a really good point, and I understand, like, because when I was in school and had to do research, and I've studied had stuff published before, but so there's like layers of protection for certain populations in terms of research, and at the same time, unless we study this stuff in some way, like that's how the whole I get on a soapbox around weight loss and the weight loss industry. Like people don't realize all of the advice out there was designed for men and male physiology, and it doesn't take into account like women are we're different, and how our bodies work. That's just the reality. So
it's just different. There's different organ structures, there's different hormone systems, there's different I also I mean, one of my personal soapboxes as well, and I see this from an angle of medicine, but also from an angle of like just innovation and tech companies, this idea of like bundling and unbundling. So we go through these cycles where like the way innovation happens is you grow something really big and then you dismantle it and build better pieces of it, and then you bundle it all up again. And I feel like we've done that in medicine, where what used to be a single practitioner and somebody that like knew you and your family for generations, and you saw your family doctor and they kind of handled everything. There's a level of kind of continuity that comes from that and really holistic care. And then we've gone through this recent period where it's all been unbundled into specialities and individual, and we're going to treat this one aspect of your physiology, or just weight loss, or just mental health, or just you know, endocrinology or just diet, like whatever it is. And great, like we get massive innovation, we understand the body systems that much better,
Yeah.
but at some point, like that all has to come together again, because we are not just like a massive different system, like we are a whole body. It should be treated as such.
Yeah. And each part interacts. Like one of the most frustrating things for me with Western medicine is just the compartmentalization, which is what you're talking about, of like,
Yeah.
there's no discussion of like, oh, well, if this is going on in your gut, like what's going on with your hormone system or any, because
Yeah.
like so many
Yeah.
things are connected in your brain.
Yeah.
So
Holistic
yeah.
medicine. And I think this
Yeah.
is like, there are, starting to be providers that are taking this kind of lens and doing so in
Hmm.
a very kind of consumer centric way of like, okay, we're going to look at you as a whole person and treat all of these interrelated conditions and women's health and, menopause and fertility and like everything,
Yeah,
weight loss, like it all bundles in together.
it does. Yeah. And those listening to the show know I take that approach, and it's, I don't even deal with symptoms anymore. It's like, let's get to like how we got here in the first place. Because a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
it's, our wiring, it's our upbringing, it's our lifestyle choices, and some of them we don't even realize are
Yeah.
what we're making. So
But on the
yeah.
data side of that as well, like, so from my lens,
Yeah.
you know, wouldn't that be more powerful if we had really tailored individual data, like all the way down to genetics? And
Yeah.
that is the future, right? That's going to happen. We just have to, make sure that we're doing that in the right way.
Yeah. So let's dive into this, because for myself and from other women I've talked to, like I've been really fascinated by the whole, evolution of epigenetics, and, done some
Mm-hmm.
genetic testing on myself and whatnot. And there's always this fear of like how much information is out there. And I know this is the problem you're trying to solve. So like what are some of the ways that you are guaranteeing like safety of data and
Yeah.
making sure it's not ending up in the wrong places with the wrong
Yeah.
hands or
Yeah.
whatnot?
Yeah. Um, Really good question. And I love that you're asking that question and thinking about that, because I think a lot of people don't realize kind of how
Yeah.
sensitive that information is. So I always tell people, like, you don't read the terms and conditions on your Apple whatever when you upgrade
Nope.
software, but if you're gonna spit in a tube for anything, like, please read the
Yeah.
terms and conditions. Our attitude on this is really, at its core, privacy, security is foundational to what we're doing at Trellis Health. It's actually how it started. And first thing is, we never sell, share, kind of do anything with that data. The way that we make money as a company is with people buying our software, consumers buying our software, and we're providing that service to you. So it's this idea of like, if it's free, you are the product. Facebook, like any of these
Yeah.
companies, if they're providing a free service and then they're making money on the back end by selling ads or selling your data or doing something else, that is 100% not our business model. So we will never sell anything on the back end. And then we have, like, maybe we won't get into it for your listeners today, but we have a whole roadmap around like a distributed system for data storage and like how to do that in a really privacy preserving way and create a level of transparency that doesn't exist in the healthcare system today.
Yeah.
So right now, people's health data is being bought and sold in these secondary and tertiary marketplaces of data. This is a $13.5 billion industry that is happening today in the US, and it's completely legal under HIPAA, because they just remove your name and they like de-identify your data, and then hospitals can sell that for additional revenue streams and for whatever it is, right? That happens today, and that's an enormous industry, and patients have generally no
No
idea that
idea.
that's
Yeah.
happening.
I actually didn't know that. That's
Okay,
freaky.
yeah. So
Yeah.
like people, it's like one of the biggest data industries that you just don't know about. And so we want to bring a level of transparency to that system. Like that
Yeah.
data flow kind of needs to happen. It's things like insurance underwriting, it's pharmaceutical research, it's population health management. Like these things are important, but you as a consumer and as an owner of that health data deserve to know where and when and with who and for what your data has been used for. And so with our platform, like one of our big kind of goals and missions are around this is that level of transparency. So you would know with our software, like, oh, my data's been shared with this research program, and I've authorized that and consented to that, or it's shared with this insurer for underwriting purposes or for this claim, or whatever it is. But you can just look at it and see where your data is.
That's huge. And yeah, I mean, like, this is putting an extreme label on it, but it's kind of true. When we end up in Western medical healthcare, it's like you lose all control, and it can be honestly an abusive relationship. Like you lose the ability to, fight for yourself and I shared with you a little bit before, my son was born 5 weeks early, and I'm pretty sure the hospital like hated me because their NICU system, we're in Fairbanks, Alaska, so like very antiquated. They wanted to measure exactly what he was eating. I wanted to breastfeed. It was like this constant battle. They had to measure the amount every 3 hours. They wanted to give him formula. And so I'm the mom who's like, well, do you have anything without soy in it? And they're like, oh, all our formulas are soy free. I'm like, bring them to me. And like the first ingredient on every single one is soy. And, so I just fought. So I was, arguing with administrators, but like no one else does that. I happen to have the education and the background and like
and the
be pissed off
confidence and
enough,
the agency
to like feel like I could stand up for myself and carry on a conversation. And I even, they put a feeding tube in him, and he pulled it out at one point, and I was like, before you put that in, we're trying nursing. He latched on a nurse for 45 minutes, started regulating his body temperature. We went home the next day, and they were like, no, you can't go yet. I'm like, here's a letter. Here's everything you told me that we need to do. None of this we can't handle at home. And like, we're going. And so, but we don't realize that we have the ability to do that, and we can fight the system. And they have, I'm not bashing Western medicine, like the healthcare system has a lot of problems. They have systems in place for a reason, because they need to, their own protection, but it doesn't mean that it's what it should be. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
And I think it's about like this, I mean, I think it's about a lot of things, but one of the things that I was thinking about as you were describing that is that like not every situation is the same, right? Like we're so used to, the medical system is defined around like, this is the standard of care and this is the protocol and this is what has to happen. And that's, like you say, for people's protection. But if we want to get to like individualized care and start to like operate in the gray areas and start to like improve the experience and have multiple stakeholders at the table kind of making these decisions and ultimately like rising tide, improve it for everybody, we have to just take a more individualized approach. And it's not that like a medical system and data and measurement and anything is bad, and it's not that like human-led decisions and whatever are bad. It's like there is a middle ground there where people can be informed and empowered and have the data and make independent decisions, and doctors and practitioners can practice better medicine as a result of that, and patients can have a better experience.
I mean, I was just thinking a lot of like, we tend to, I've been guilty of this, and then I've met plenty of Western medical doctors who are as fed up with the system as I have been, or disillusioned. But a lot of the critical, like their critical thinking and their ability to be the practitioner is taken away because they're stuck within the confines of like, here's what insurance will pay for, or here's how we treat this. And I've read some interesting stuff around COVID, and like there was not, once a plan was in place, like no, they couldn't vary outside of that without massive insanity. So coming down on them. But so we just hit on a whole slew of things. This is fun. Like I said, different conversation for the show, but important, and I think more and more women that I meet are in that place of wanting to take the control back and work with people who are more partners than they are like stuck in that system, honestly.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and it sounds like this is a really good, I almost look at it as like knowing your credit score, like
Right.
know where your health data has gone and where it is. So
There is a lot of
um,
parallels actually in the fintech industry and like what's starting to happen in healthcare and like some of these digital tools and interoperability, and it's also like, healthcare is one of the slowest moving, like it's like 30% of GDP. It's an enormous
yeah,
heavy industry. It takes a while to change, but you've
yeah.
got millennial Gen Z people coming through that are used to this like Amazon experience, and you get confronted with healthcare and you're like, what? What just happened? I have
Really?
Venmo and Mint, and I have like 10, 12 logins now.
Yeah. Um, cool. So for women, I guess listening to this who are intrigued by trellis, at this point, your focus is more in the perinatal period with pre and postnatal care. It sounds like. Do you
Yeah.
have plans in the future for opening it up more? Like how far out are you on that?
Yeah, we do. And as as soon as possible. Like this is one of the challenging things about building a startup and building a company is that you have to start with like a focus area and really kind of build from there. So like you mentioned, we're focused on pregnancy and building tools around pregnancy for now, but our ultimate mission is that this is for everybody. This is not, and you know, within the next couple of years, in the US especially, like that will get easier with some of the regulatory changes and
Yeah,
21st Century Cures Act and kind of other things coming into play. This idea of like individual access is starting to increase. So it is definitely part of our roadmap. But and I would just say, like, if people are interested in like following along in the story, um, feel free to like sign up to our like mailing list, and we're also on social media, and like we talk about more than just pregnancy health. It's really
yeah,
about like creating a movement around health ownership and health agency and like
yeah,
a different experience with the healthcare system.
yeah. And I think it's important to realize that in order to change it, we have to be willing to stand up and demand it. And I'm starting to see more of that,
Mhm.
in the women I work with. But for a lot of, my approach has always been I don't want to be part of the system. So I just, I'm in a different world off on my own. But to really make any change, I think we have to be willing to stand up to the system, and say like,
Yeah,
hey, this isn't right, and I
yeah.
I want something
And
better.
there's people like all throughout the system. Like there's
Yeah,
doctors, there's um healthcare systems, there's startups, like everybody, I think,
yeah,
throughout the system recognizes some of the problems
yeah,
associated with this. This is also one of the reasons why we are taking a very different angle and being consumer centric and kind of
yeah,
consumer first in our play, because my thesis is that if you go into like a system as complex as a healthcare system, you try and build something that fits into that, you're not
yeah.
going to build something that's radically different.
No, and you're going to end up compromising in order to make it work
Yeah,
for
yeah,
everything. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, so good for you. I'm excited for this journey. So, in wrapping up, and I'll have you share, where to find you, and I'll put the link to your to Trellis in the show notes. But uh, what what do you, as like a starting step for people who maybe are like, oh, I didn't even realize this was going on, or like how do I start, taking more control? What recommendations or steps do you have for them, or just like a
Yeah, I mean, I think it's multifaceted, and the biggest one, in short of having access to these digital tools and kind of the bigger changes that are happening, but in the intermediate, it's around a psychological shift maybe, and that this is your health. Like
Mhm.
it's you know you and health care and our understanding of that is rapidly changing. And at the end of the day, it's, it's your body. It's one of the most complex systems, on earth, but it's yours. And so having a sense of like asking questions, you know, challenging, like if you, I say to pregnant women as well, like the intuition that you have with like what's going
Yeah.
on in your body at that time is amazing, and nobody knows that better than you. But that's relevant to other aspects of health as well, right?
Yeah.
So like just taking the kind of mental space to be aware of your body and your health, and having that sense of ownership, even if the system doesn't necessarily like reflect that all the time.
Yeah.
And also I would say, like, don't be afraid of measurement. Like, it's not, having data is not a bad thing. It can actually be really empowering.
Yeah. I agree. There's, either we're objective or we're not, but if you like can gather that data, and like the more you understand yourself, tune into yourself, all of that stuff, the more you might find answers to things that maybe you are feeling frustrated because no one is answering for you
Mm-hmm.
in the system.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
awesome. Well,
I'm
Estelle,
optimistic.
yeah, I love it.
I
Somebody
have
has
to
to be
be.
optimistic about this. I haven't joined this fight yet. I just kind of was like, that sucks, and I'm done. But that wasn't the only reason I stopped being a chiropractor. In any case, thank you so much for coming on and just sharing your passion and vision. And I'm hoping making some people stop and think.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah, it's coming, and
yeah,
like I say, I want a future for my son where we have an equitable, socially just, digital
yeah.
first health data system. Like, I don't think that's too much to ask for the next generation of children.
I don't either. And it's us as moms and women and all the things that probably are going to have to stand up and fight for it. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah. This has been
I'm
such a fun
inspired.
conversation.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Thank you. For all our listeners, we'll see you next week.